lately, in the last few years, I'm noticing that a lot more care has been taken into trying to isolate these things in a way. And yes, of course, and intuitively, we know that if you learn how to do something well later, you're going to see a benefit reap from that. But now it's happening much more. They're focusing much more on that as well. And the last thing I want to say about this is, you reminded me of my good friend in New Zealand who has an e-learning company there, and he was asked to evaluate the first e-learning effort of a company there. They called him and said, "Hey, we just finished it, we delivered it, it's gone well, but we'd like to know how to make the next one even better. Would you come in and talk to us about it?" And he said, "Sure, can you send me a link to it? I'll go through the course first." And they did. And it was a short thing, it was 17 minutes long. He went in and started talking to them and said, and before they could ask him any questions, he started asking them questions. He said, "First of all, how long is this lesson?" And they said, "It's about 17 minutes." He goes, "Yeah, that's how long it took me to go through it from start to finish, looking at everything, etc. Now, tell me, how long did the average learner go through it?" And he said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, just have you looked at the stats on that? Have you seen how long the average learner took to go through it?" And they said, "Well, it would be 17 minutes. They said, "Well, not necessarily. Why don't we take a look?" And so they did, and they were shocked. They said 2.7 minutes? That was the average learner, because all they were doing is hitting next, next, next. And they said, "Well, but maybe it's okay, because after all, there was a quiz at the end, and they all passed it, so it worked." And he said, "Well, okay, let's look at that now. How many times did the average learner go through the quiz?" And he said, "Well, you could take it as many times as needed." Okay. The average learner took it 4.5 times. There were only 5 questions on the test. And so they were just basically not even reading it. They were just seeing which ones they got wrong and choosing the next one in turn, etc. And they were pretty shocked. They said, "We spent $37,000 to create this." And it didn't work, because they weren't looking at those data at all at first. They just assumed that everybody completed it and everybody passed, so that was all that was needed. Nope, not at all. Now, I don't think I even answered your question.
That's the other one. That's the other
Rick,
one I'd say, Joe. That's the other one I say. My first boss told me never to assume. It makes an ass out of you and me.
That's a well-known phrase. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that one I know.
Yeah. That one plays over here as well, Lesley.
Yep.
I did want to jump in, as Joe knows me well, on the emotional discussion. The neuroscientist Paul Zak, his study is he's made it his life's work to study the emotions and the role that neurotransmitters have in triggering our reward circuit and other circuits that cause us to feel or interpret those signals as different emotions. And for example, oxytocin makes us feel great, is responsible for the runner's high, and that same emotion triggers the aha response when you learn something new. Learning is supposed to feel wonderful. And so something that he's fond of, since we are using a lot of our favorite quotes today, is he often says all learning is emotional, and he is absolutely right. There is always some emotional response. Now let's take a look at the example that Joe just had. That emotional response was they actually did teach them something. They taught them that this particular course is boring and they should get out of it as soon as possible. Mm-hmm. And here's how you do it. And unfortunately, that taught those learners also to expect another boring experience the next time they get training from their company that is delivered in the same way. So there was always, and they may have felt emotions of anger or frustration, boredom, but they certainly didn't feel that, aha, I learned something new. So whether you plan on it or not, you are going to generate an emotional response. You can't help it. The trick is to be very intentional about it, and in your design to think about what sort of emotion am I going for, and how do I create an experience that generates that emotion.
Yeah, and Margie, like you always talk about, without emotion, there's absolutely no retention. We remember things that affect us emotionally. We don't remember much of anything else.